What's going on, everybody? ChromeOnRust here. We're going to be taking a look at your basic Barbarian build, something that you're going to be able to use without having epic legendary synergy or anything like that. You can just run some rare items, you can get up into Torment. That's what I want to talk about, is the precursor to the Earth and Might set. Before you get all the epic legendary gear, you're going to be able to use a build similar to this. All you're going to need to do is stack cooldown reduction on your gear. You're not going to want to go for attack speed or anything like that. You can see that on just rare gear alone, I was able to get up to 45.46% cooldown reduction. And what that's going to mean is it's going to allow us to not need to use, well, a Fury generator. You could go ahead and throw on something like Bash, Cleave, Frenzy, or Weapon Throw, but when you use those, you're really going to want to start stacking attack speed instead of cooldown reduction, because they're kind of really slow. They don't generate you much Fury unless you have a decently high attack speed. So our first ability is going to be Avalanche with Volcano. The main reason being we're going towards fire because we want to use the Earth and Might set. And well, Avalanche Volcano costs us no Fury and it has a 30-second cooldown on it. We're stacking cooldown reduction. I have 45%, so it's sitting at about 16-17 seconds for just to use this ability. The rune that you're going to want to go with is Volcano. Very high damage dealing skill. Now, Seismic Slam with Shattered Ground is actually really good. I tried to get Hammer the Ancients to work with Smash. A lot of players, Barbarians, have been using this rune in particular on this ability, but Seismic Slam with Shattered Ground was just buffed, and it's actually a really, really good ability. So go ahead and try it out for yourself. It's going to increase the damage to 735% weapon damage. It's going to turn it into fire, and it's also going to knock up all enemies into the air. So it's not a knockback, it's kind of like a little bit of a stun. It gives you a little bit more kiting capabilities. It is a very long range ability. If we take a look at it here, you can see that it shoots almost out to the entire side of the screen there. Kind of like a Demon Hunter, or not really, but you know, just it's nice. AoE is really going to help you out. Now, Call the Ancients Council Rises. It's going to turn the Ancients into fire damage. It's going to double their damage, and we're stacking cooldown reduction. It's got a 120-second cooldown on it. I know it's a long ability, but when you start stacking the cooldown reduction, and then you also go ahead and use something like Boonable Kathos, which is going to reduce the duration of Recall of the Ancients by 30 seconds. We're also going to be using Wrath the Berserker. Boonable Kathos is going to reduce that by 30 seconds as well. It's going to be able to take a big chunk of that time that we're going to be spent waiting, and the additional cooldown that we have on our gear. You're going to be able to use these abilities quite often. Now, Leap is not an ability that I was using. I was just kind of messing around with it. Furious Charge with Merciless Assault is really, really good. This is going to be your evade ability. You're going to want one, especially when you don't have, well, any kind of evasion. You don't have the legendary gear to keep you alive or anything like that. Merciless Assault, the cooldown is going to be reduced by 2 seconds for every enemy it hits. This effect can reduce the cooldown by 10 seconds. We already have cooldown on our gear, like I keep talking about. You know, you just cast that, you can see in just about like 5 seconds or so, you're going to be able to cast it again. Great ability. Warcry with Charge. We're not using the Fury generators like I've been talking about, so Warcry with Charge is going to increase the generation of the Fury from 20 up to 50. It's a great Fury generator for us. Now, Wrath the Berserker, I pretty much already talked about it. There's 2 runes. Well, there's actually a few runes that you could use. I prefer the one that's going to increase the damage. When you're in the lower torments or whatever the case may be, you're not really going to be needing a ton of tank stats. If you do get to that point and you want to go up in torments and you feel like your damage is just obliterating everything, but your protection is just too low, or your toughness, you could go ahead and throw on Striding Giant. It's going to reduce all damage taken by 50%. It's also a great ability. Now, for the passives, Rampage, increased strength by 1% for 8 seconds after killing or assisting in killing an enemy. This effect can stack up to 25 times. So 25% strength is going to be giving us a ton of damage as well as a bunch of protection. 25% of our strength that we have, you know, let's just say we're sitting at about 6,000. 25% of that is going to be 1,500 additional strength that we're going to be getting. We're going to be sitting up over 8,000 strength. It's going to be giving us an additional like 1,000 plus armor. It's great passive that you're definitely going to want to try out with pretty much most Barbarian builds. Now, once again, I was trying to not use a Fury generator, and once you start stacking the cooldown reduction, you're not going to be needing to do that, but I still was having maybe slight troubles, and Animosity is going to increase all Fury generation by 10%. increase maximum fury by 20, and then also we have Unforgiving. You no longer degenerate fury, but instead you're going to generate 2 fury. Then the last one we already talked about, which is Boonable Kathos, and well, that is going to also be able to reduce your Earthquake cooldown by 15 seconds. Now, I want to jump into the gear, because you see the skills that I'm using. I'm using Avalanche and Seismic Slam. On my gear though, I do have Earthquake damage and Hammer the Ancients damage, because that's the type of spec that I thought I was going to be running in the lower torments, was these two abilities, maybe throw up some Earthquake, maybe throw on some Hammer the Ancients. I was wrong. So the gear that I have is not really going to be what you're wanting to go for. This is going to be the type of gear that you're going to want to get once you start to collect your Earth and Might set. You're going to be wanting to get Earthquake damage, and Hoda damage is debatable. It depends on the spec that you are running. I wouldn't bother rolling for Hammer the Ancients damage. Once you start to get into the end game gear, well, you can start to look into things, start testing out a few various builds, but you're always going to be wanting Earthquake damage on your shoulders when you start going towards the end game gear. I just wanted to kind of throw that out there. Even with the additional Earthquake damage and the additional Hoda damage that I have on the chest, the helmet, the shoulders, and the gloves, I was really liking Avalanche and Seismic Slam a lot more, because, well, lower torments, your toughness may be a little bit low. As you saw, I was running rare gear. I was able to do Torment 1 with it. And the Seismic Slam is great. It was beating out the Hoda, even with the Hoda damage that I had on the gear, so I was kind of surprised, but I was really liking the ability, so I'd try it out for yourself. Then Avalanche with Volcano. I tried running Earthquake, and it was okay, but Avalanche was just completely dominating it. The cooldown is much shorter, as well as when we cast our Avalanche, as you see there, and then we throw out a few Seismic Slams, well, we're going to be able to reduce the cooldown of Avalanche by over 1 second, because every time we use our Seismic Slam, we're going to be spending 30 Fury. And, well, cooldown is going to be reduced by 1 second for every 25 Fury that you spend on Avalanche. Just really enjoying the skills. Now we're going to go over the rest of the gear. Like I said, you're going to want to stack cooldown reduction as much as possible. So on your shoulders, early game, I'd probably just go for some Strength, Vit, All-Res, and cooldown reduction on your shoulders. For the helmet, you're always going to want Strength, Crit Chance, and a Socket. And you're always going to be wanting to use the Royal, or not Royal, but just the Diamonds in general for that additional cooldown reduction that you can get. Now on your Amulet, this isn't an optimized Amulet. I'm running a Fire spec, and really I'd want Fire damage on here instead of Vitality. Now there's kind of been a dilemma, and somewhat of a debate I feel on Amulets, on whether it's good to go cooldown reduction on your Amulet or to get your Fire damage, Crit Chance, and Crit Hit damage on there. I haven't done enough testing to really determine for endgame which one's going to be better. I don't have the gear to do that yet. I'm getting there. But Crit Chance, Crit damage, primary stat, Fire damage, or whatever elemental damage you're going for, and then cooldown reduction are going to be like the top 5 that you're going to want to get on your Amulet. You're pretty much always going to want 4 of those 5 on there. Now for the chest, Strength, Vit, and then you're going to want Earthquake damage for late game. Early game though, you could get Avalanche damage. Like if you start rolling your gear and you're not quite to the Earthquake build yet, and you come across Avalanche damage or something like that, just leave the Avalanche damage for now. You can re-roll that piece of gear later if you come up with some really awesome Earthquake and you were just re-rolling an item. Like if I just had the shoulders here and I came across 15% Earthquake damage on these shoulders, even if I wasn't using Earthquake at the time, you're just going to want to leave the stat, because it's possible that you'll never see that 15% Earthquake damage again. For early game though, you're not going to be needing it. Now for the bracers, you're going to want Fire, for our case, whatever elemental, Strength, Vit, and Crit Chance, or it could be Strength, All Resist, and Crit Chance, but the 3 that you're always going to want is your primary stat and elemental damage, and then you're also going to be wanting Crit Chance on there. Now if you get Vitality, for secondary stats, physical resistance is really amazing. Things like Fire Chains, they're called Fire Chains, but they do deal physical damage. Why? I'm not quite sure, but I've been calling them physical chains, and pretty much everybody else I know has been as well, just because when we heard that, we're just like, Fire Chains deal physical damage? It's like, okay, whatever. Now for the belt, Strength, Vit, All-Res, Life Percent, that's going to be pretty much what you're going to want to use. Now if you get a Mighty Belt, you could also go for something like Life per Fury spent. So those would be the 5 primaries that I go for. Life after kill as a secondary is amazing, and actually Freeze Chance for your belt I didn't even pay attention to it, but this is like the exact stats that you're going to want on there. For a secondary stat, you're going to be looking for life after kill. Now, secondary stats are not going to be quite as important as the primary stats for Torment 3 and below, but once you start getting up into like Torment 5 or Torment 4, Torment 5, and Torment 6, just those basic stats from the secondary can really help you progress to that next Torment level. Now for your rings, strength, crit chance, crit damage, and cooldown reduction. That's like the new trifecta for your rings that you're going to want to go for. Same thing on this one. Strength of it, or strength, crit chance, crit damage, and cooldown reduction. Once again, if you could get some physical resistance on there or something, that'd be great. You could go for some life after each kill if you can. Health globes are also very amazing, especially when you start getting into higher torments. For your primaries on your pants, you're going to want strength, fit, all resist, and you're always going to want the 2 sockets. On the chest, you're always going to want the 3 sockets. I don't think I talked about that, but for the pants, secondary stats that you could go for, I actually got a little cheat sheet here. Secondary stats, you're going to want like physical resistance. You can get slow on your pants as well, or life after kill would also be the top secondary stat that you're going to want to go for. Now for your weapons, it's going to be pretty much the same thing. You're going to want high damage, primary stat, cooldown, and a socket. You're going to want that for both weapons here that you see. Now the thing about barbarians, and I'm going to talk briefly about something, and that is, you see that my damage on this weapon, it's 1323 to 1779. I'm always going to want to have the higher number there in my main hand while I'm using Earthquake, because, well, Earthquake is only going to go off of your main hand damage. So people are getting into stat sticks. Technically, you could take this damage on this weapon, re-roll it into whatever else you're going to be needing into addition. If you want to get some area damage onto here, if you wanted to get really just whatever, some vitality. If you're running a straight Earthquake build, now this isn't going to be for the type of build that you're going to be running currently, but this is just something I want to throw out there because you're going to get to that point eventually. You're always going to want your higher damage weapon in your main hand. Normally it's going to be something like a mace. See this sword here? It has a higher attack speed, so you really need to pay attention to that 1155 to 1561 to, well, 1323 to 1779. That's going to determine which item or which weapon you're going to be wanting in your main hand. And then our last item here is going to be the boots. Strength of it, all resistance. If you're going for Hoda, if you're going for Seismic Slam, you could get some of that additional damage on there. Armor, life regen. Movement speed is really not that crucial anymore on your boots because you can get it from your Paragon levels. So that's pretty much it for the gear. I can go over the stats here real fast. Having around 500 all resist, you're going to be fine, especially when you're throwing on something like charge, and it's going to be boosting your armor for you. You got 78% damage reduction here. Our physical resistance is nice and high. It's almost up to 70%. Like I said, that's going to be the one resistance that you're really going to want to stack. For Torment 2, Torment 3, things like that, 250k life, it's going to be more than enough. I'm actually running the same amount of life on my Torment 6 Barbarian. Now, I die sometimes. I don't have perfect gear yet. I've been testing a bunch of things out. I've been optimizing my barb. I want about 300k life. I feel like for end game, that's what's going to be the best. And then the last thing we are going to go over is the Paragon Points. If I were to first be starting out, I didn't have a ton of, well, Paragon Points. What I do first is increase my movement speed to the max. So at this point, we have no movement speed on our gear, so I'd dump all my first points into movement speed, and then from there, I'd probably just go ahead and dump it all into strength. Now for the offensive, cooldown reduction is really amazing. It's almost beating out crit chance. It actually is beating out crit chance for certain builds. For like your rings, where you're only getting like 6 crit, you can get up to 8% cooldown reduction. Players have me going that way. Crit chance would be the second one that I would go for in this list. Now all resistance for your Barbarian is going to be the most important. We have a ton of armor because we're running a strength character. The strength is going to be giving us armor. Stacking all resist first is going to be your best bet. Life regen, armor, health, they're also all really good. It's just going to be whatever you're going to be needing next. After all resist, it's kind of whatever you need next. Then for utility, for this type of build, resource cost reduction is amazing. After that, if I needed some healing, I would go for life on hit. If I just needed to increase my damage from there, I'd go area damage. And then pretty much as everybody's been saying, gold find is always going to be your last choice. Now I forgot about this, I want to go over some gear that you're going to be starting to look for, because I don't want to leave you high and dry and be like, well, it's great, I got the gear, I got the build, but what am I looking for now? That's kind of what I want to talk about. Blackthorns, I know people just really don't like it, but Blackthorns is actually really, really good. If you're just using rare gear like I am here, throwing on Blackthorns is going to be great. Really, any of the Barbarian sets, as you start to collect them, if you start to get them before you actually get the Earth and Might set, just start using them. Their bonuses are pretty good, especially the early ones, like the 2 set 500 Vitality. That's an additional 500 Vitality. That's something that you get from a piece of gear. Additional 100 All Resist, we talked about that already. All Resist is great for your Barbarian. Now, what makes this build work? Because I guess we could talk about that a little bit. We're going to be starting to move into the Earth and Might set, and you're going to be able to really leap around and kind of do whatever you want here. And we'll go ahead, throw up our leap, and we'll show this off. Now, you're going to always want to have your Lut Socks. The one rune that I'm going to recommend that you use once you start to collect your Earthquake set is going to be using Death from Above. It's going to guarantee that you stun the enemy for 3 seconds. Now it's going to have some diminishing returns on it, but it's still great because once you leap in, you're going to be really, really vulnerable until you once again leap out. Now the Earth and Might set, you're not going to need like epic legendaries or anything like that. Once you start collecting some gear like that, you're going to be able to really start to move up in the torment levels. That's what the Earth and Might set does. It creates a ton of earthquakes. When you throw on the Lut Socks, it's going to allow you to leap 3 times. It's a really, really great set. That is what I've been experimenting with the most. I really haven't tried the Raid Cores out. I haven't tried the IK yet. I'm going to get to that point. I really, really, like most Barbarians, been trying to get the Earth and Might set as efficient as I possibly can. Our set pieces, as we know, are just going to be great. But for some legendaries that you're going to want to also look for is, well, running Act 1 bounties is going to be a great idea because you're going to be able to come across the Royal Ring of Grandeur. It's going to reduce the number of items you need for the set bonuses by 1. So let's say we only had 3 pieces here. We can still go ahead, throw on our Royal Ring, and while we're going to be getting that 4-piece bonus, this comes from the Act 1 bounty bag as well as a weapon down here. Mad Monarchs is a really great item, especially when you're just starting out. Farming Act 1 for your barbs, I feel like, is just going to be the best bet. In addition to that, you could come across some legendary bracers. They're not good, but they're going to be better than your rares most of the time. It's also, you can come across this amulet like I was able to. This is the amulet that I'm currently using. It came from an Act 1 bounty badge. Unfortunately, I'd probably rather I'd definitely rather have one of these other ones over here. After earning a massacre bonus, 4 skeletons are summoned to fight by your side for 10 seconds. They really don't do much damage. But the legendary secondaries are really amazing on amulets. Summon a Shadow Clone to your aid. This is a really good one. The Honto Vaxo. DeVoe's Energy Trap. This is also very good. Increased stun duration. Like I said, when you're using your leap, you're going to be wanting to use Death from Above, which is going to be stunning, and then that's going to be increased into stun duration by 23%. And another one, the S of Johann. I haven't been able to come across any real good legendary amulets other than this one that you see here. I have Ilch, whatever it is. Reduced damage from ranged attacks by 34.4%. That's really, really huge. If you come across one of those with like fire, strength, crit chance, crit damage, that type of thing, definitely use it. Then probably some of my favorite amulets here. I haven't really tested much with these, but I have a little bit with these because I keep them in my inventory so I can hot swap between them when I really need them. One of the, just any of the amulets that are going to prevent elemental damage that you take is just going to be really, really epic. Got one for Arcane. I got one for Poison and Lightning. I have not come across Fire or Arcane yet. I'll get there though. Definitely going to be grinding some more. Now for other rings, Unity is really, really amazing. If you're only playing solo and you haven't heard about this, if you equip a Unity ring on your follower, you equip one on yourself, and then you use the trinket. I don't know if I have one in here. No, I took them all out. Use the trinket to where your follower cannot die. It's actually going to be giving you 50% damage reduction. You're going to be able to move up in torments quite a bit as long as your damage is sufficient enough. Now you're not going to be able to play with your friends, and that's kind of why I don't like it. But, you know, it's something that you could do. And then the last item, or last ring that I want to talk about is going to be the Stone of Jordan. There's other good rings that you could go for, but I have this one here, the Stone of Jordan with crit chance, increased damage against elites, arcane resistance, fire skills. Those are going to be the stats you want. But if you come across one with cooldown reduction, I've actually been preferring this ring over the crit chance one. Just reducing the cooldown of your abilities is going to be amazing, amazing, amazing. Now the best chest for this type of build at this point is going to be your Cinder Coat. 100% reduces the resource cost of fire skills by like 25 to 30%. Gets fire skills on there. You're going to want strength, sockets, and then the fourth skill that you go for. End game, you're going to be looking for Earthquake. Early on, you're probably just going to be looking for All Resist Vitality, something like that. And Darials, haven't come across a good one at all. You're going to want fire damage on there, and then you're going to want a crit chance or a socket roll, and then you're probably going to re-roll the attack speed into either crit chance or a socket, whichever one you didn't get. Because having strength, fire damage, crit chance, and a socket is going to be your optimal roll on your Andes. Mage Fists, don't really think they need any introduction. It's like a Penfecta or something like that, because you can get every ability that you want on there. You get your fire skills damage, you get your strength. Optimally, you're going to want to reroll your attack speed once again into cooldown reduction, crit chance, and then crit damage. And then for the best secondary, it would be like physical resistance. Belts, since we're a barbarian, we actually come across quite a few options. I really like this belt if you're trying to get a little bit tankier. Increase the duration of Ignore Pain by 4 to 6 seconds. It's a really, really great belt to go ahead and try out. Another one, Chilinix Chain. Increasing your movement speed is clutch. You want to kill things faster, well, getting to them a little bit quicker is going to help you then kill them just a little bit faster. Then the Herriting Waistguard is just really, really amazing. I have not come across a good one yet, but I'm still searching. Just from opening a chest, clicking on a corpse, clicking on a weapon rack, armor racks, anything like that, you're going to be able to double your damage. Now this actually goes from like 100%, I believe, to like 100, 135% somewhere in there. This is a pretty bad one. It has good, decent stats. How about that? Not good. They're okay stats. But Harringtons are going to be really, really amazing. A couple bracers to look for is going to be the Ancient Defenders. They're just really good. Each stunned enemy within 25 yards is going to reduce all of your damage taken by 9%, and I do believe that varies. Then Healing Wells replenish all resources and reduce all cooldowns by 52 seconds. Now, ideally, you're not going to want to use a legendary pair of bracers like that, because you can just keep them in your stash, and then you just right-click on them, and you just hot swap them. You click on your Healing Well, you throw on your regular pair of bracers again, and you're really not going to need to keep them on. But if you get a pair and you're using like rares or whatever and they're better, you know, you're obviously going to want to go ahead and use them. Then the last one, we got a few weapons here. Now, second or two-handed weapons are not really the best, but you know, if you come across like an IK weapon and you're just using rares, like at this point, I don't want to say that I'd probably use the rare still because I haven't tested, but losing 18% cooldown reduction, a ton of strength, 115 crit damage, it's just going to be really extreme. But you know, if you need it to finish your IK set, you're going for that 4-piece, you're going for that next piece or whatever, your weapons are bad, using something like that's going to be okay. Now the other one that I would recommend, or semi-recommend, would be a Maximus if you come across one, because they can get the fire skills, deal damage on there. Then you're going to want strength and a socket. That's going to be basically be how all these are. You're going to want damage, strength. Sunkeepers are amazing because they get increased damage against elites. Devastators, now these are going to be something that you're going to come across. It's going to be a craftable item, so you actually have to find the crafting materials, you have to find the plan and all that, and then you will be able to craft yourself up a Devastator to get the fire skills, deal damage on there. Really, really amazing. Burning Axe of Sandkiss. Now if you have to choose between what item you're going to be putting in your main hand for later game, a Devastator is always going to beat out the Burning Axe in your main hand, because, well, that little number like that we've always been talking about, that 1506 to 2066, is going to be able to get higher because this is a mace. It has slower attack speed on it. It's going to be able to get up to the same damage per second, but it's not going to be the actual same raw damage. So running your Burning Axe of Sandkiss in your offhand, and then either running a Devastator or a Sunkeeper in your main hand, it's going to be really, really great. Thunder Furies are great for a lot of builds. It's not going to be your optimal item, but the chance on hit to blast your enemies with lightning, dealing a certain percentage of damage, then it's going to jump to additional targets, and then each target that it hits is going to have their attack speed and their movement speed reduced. It's just a really great weapon. Then we already talked about the Mad Monarchs. So that's really all I had. That is going to be your like precursor to running your Earthquake build. This is going to be a type of spec that you're going to be able to use. Just go for things that have cooldown on them, skills. Like the skills that you choose are not going to be super important. There is some level of importance at this point in the game though. It's going to be trial and error. What's going to fit your playstyle? What's going to make you clear the fastest with the gear that you have? Well, that's going to be it for me, everyone. I am ChromeOnRust for Core Expert Gaming. I'm going to be coming out with a more in-depth Barbarian guide. I just wanted to start out with something a little bit more basic so that way no one will be left behind. I'm out of here, and you all have a great day.